our users. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I forgot that today was St. Patrick's Day. So usually when we do these, there's a theme. So we did Groundhog's Day for crying out loud. We've done Valentine's Day. We've done other holiday seasons. The, we've done Groundhog Day, and I forgot that this was St. Patrick's Day. So so I did a few last minute edits right before we went live here. So we have the, oh, you can't really see it. That's me. You don't need to look at me. There's a little bit of a background here that you won't see. There's an Irish or leprechaun top hat or something like that hidden behind this disgruntled looking driver. So anyway, I'm feeling bad about that we didn't fully theme today's session, but anyway, we'll see if we can get through it. My name is John Kulas. I'm a 20-year professor of industrial and organizational psychology, about a 12-year user of R for normal kind of statistical applications, but for the majority of that time, for the majority of those 12 years, 9 or 10 of them, I would say, I've been moving away from PowerPoint and Word and Excel, and I've been executing my entire project from within the same environment that I specify my R analyses. And so every week, we're just here promoting. That's when I say we. Sometimes I'm joined by leprechauns or other friends. Um, and we're here to promote this way of structuring your work such that you never leave your scripting environment, your analytical environment, because the tools we have available to us right now are so powerful and accessible and fun. They're fun to use. So every week I'm here holding this kind of live Q&A in case anyone stumbles by and wants to ask questions from a non-AI that has some experience using this. We use this metaphor of an academic office hour. So I was a professor for so long that I kind of still am comfortable with this sort of way of interacting with new learners, I guess is probably the right way to put it, or people who are interested in the same topics. So I hang out for about an hour, and the focus of this is to just kind of knock heads together. That doesn't sound right, does it? Get heads together on topics if there's any sort of product that you're endeavoring to create and want some help with it, or just want someone to bounce some ideas off of. In the absence of those comments, by the way, tonight I could use some comments because I checked my audio prior to popping on, which I always do, and it looked to me like the levels might have been a little low. So actually don't comment on that because I don't know if I can do anything about it. So if it is, I apologize. Turn up the volume. I'll warn you before I play one of my drops. But in the absence of this shared problem solving, we focus on kind of just specialized or specific features and capabilities of using this way of structuring your work. And so last week was exciting because we were climbing the alphabet and we got to the letter Z, and we finished that last week. This week, it was kind of an open topic. So there was no structure, there was no restriction in terms of what we could do. And so I decided to extract a topic that we talked about last week. It kind of just popped up, and that is how do you cite packages that you use within your project? And so there's a whole series of things you can do. Like anything with R, there's multiple ways to do this, but there's a series of helper functions and packages specifically built to make it easier for you to cite packages that you use, the actual analytical and the scripting packages that you use to facilitate the completion and execution of your project. So that'll be tonight's focus. It was kind of strange for me not being constrained by the alphabet, and it felt liberating. So we get to do package citations tonight. Before well, first of all, if you want to help promote, please go ahead and give a like. You can subscribe if you like, and I'm going to try to get my quota of 3 of those in tonight. I keep missing it. This was my New Year's resolution, was to do that, and I haven't been holding to that New Year's resolution very well. But because the way in which we explore these features is open-ended and unscripted, we do start each subsequent week with a recap of what we learned last week in the hopes that it's a format that's a little more conducive to learning. Before we get to that, let me also say that in the chat, in the comments, there is a link to these slides. Please use them. There's resources embedded throughout, especially if you came here to kind of get some ideas for how to cite packages using these procedures that we talk about weekly, go ahead and check out this week's slides. There's a bunch of resources embedded there, hidden as hyperlinks primarily. And then there's also the standard tutorial that I've been uh, offering in the chat every week. So it's a walkthrough that, as long as you have Quarto installed on your machine, you don't need to do anything special. Just install it like any other piece of software. R will find it. RStudio will find it. Positron will find it. Jupyter Lab will find it. There's a walkthrough there. It'll help you build a report so you can kind of get a sense of what some of these capabilities are if you're not yet using this within your own kind of way that you execute your projects. Okay, so let's get into our transition into what did happen last week, the very eventful and the very much anticipated from yours truly, Z week.
While in their search for the green part oogle, Rocky and Bullwinkle succeeded only in capturing each other. Then as they turned, they saw a huge boulder rolling down the mountain toward them.
Look out for that rock, Rock!
Hey, look, that's no rock. It's an egg.
An egg?
And look, there's a message inside it.
What's it say?
When you get this fortune egg, you'll climb the hill and shake a leg.
Well, come on, Rock.
And in a few moments, our friends had reached the top of the hill where Boris had tied and gagged the oogle bird right in its nest.
But the eagle managed to lay an egg and roll it out to us. Pretty clever, eh, Bullwinkle?
Yeah, for a bird brain, it's pretty smart.
Boris, you hear that, oogle?
Duh, they found the bird.
What now, darling?
What else? It's time for fiendish plan.
And Boris explained his latest fiendish plan. As soon as our heroes launched their boat, he would cross the beach to a huge cannon, and as our heroes sailed away, would sink them with one well-placed shot.
And best of all, Natasha,
Yes, darling.
I do it when their backs are turned.
Meanwhile, our heroes had just brought the oogle bird down the hill to the beach where King Bushwick the Thorty-Thoid was waiting.
Greetings, O repository of all knowledge. Likewise, O wizard. Now let's get started.
So I had intended to make those shorter, but also last week we only got one. Actually, last week there were no oogles. So the oogle bird is part of the story, but was not featured in last week's clip, which ironically, I mentioned last week that I sometimes get copyright struck. That is, YouTube comes to me and says, hey, people, it's always Russia. So people in Russia can't find your video. And I'm like, oh no, those poor people in Russia. But it's because of a copyright claim that apparently is unique to Russia regarding the lounge music that I always start off these sessions with. There's now been 120 or so lounge songs. In 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 of them, somebody in Russia says, hey, I own that, or I think I own that. There's a whole process you can go through to kind of like say, I fight it, but I don't think it affects what we're doing here, promoting this way of work. I'm sorry to anyone in Russia that wants to do this and don't have access to these. But anyway, last week I mentioned that I'm grateful that we didn't get copyright struck for any Rocky and Bullwinkle clips because I used those repeatedly. And for the first time ever, of course, last week we did get copyright struck for Rocky and Bullwinkle. And funny enough, it was Russia again. Russia has something against us using this way of doing our work. So that being said, last week what we took a look at was Zotero and ways in which Zotero can be integrated within these projects that we craft fully within our scripting environments. And so I've been using primarily RStudio, so I'm probably just going to call it RStudio. But certainly you could use other IDEs. You could just do this straight from R if you're interested, the R console, or Positron and Jupyter Lab are kind of the two other popular IDEs to try to execute this stuff from within. So last week we were talking about integrating Zotero, specifically using RStudio, and one of the things I omitted last week that I wish I would have spent a little time on was how to get information into Zotero, the software itself. And so I'm referring to this as importing. And there's two ways that we talked about last week, which are the ISBN or DOI or other identifier. That's what this wand here is allowing you to do is it's allowing you to do a search for an identifier for a reference that you're interested in. And so that's a really quick and slick and nice way to do it. There's also the option to manually add something. I don't know why anyone would do that, but it is an option there. I can't foresee many circumstances where that would be something that you would need or want to do. And then the other thing that we did talk about was if you already have a listed bibliography in something like bibtech or biblatex format with that .bib extension on it, then you can use the toolbar here from the file option. There is a import sub option, and that import sub option, you just identify your bib file and it will automatically pull everything into Zotero for you. And then the third thing that I regret we should have talked about, we alluded to but we didn't check it out, was the way that most people probably get stuff into Zotero is to use browser extensions or connectors. Again, there's a hyperlink there, and these are the little additions that you have on your browsers that in the context of Zotero, it lets you, once you find an article you're interested in, you just engage with that connector or extension. We're using those words synonymously, and it'll grab the information for you. So that's probably the slickest way to import. Now, exporting is kind of just the reverse of that. So the main way that we're going to export this, if we want to export it, is to engage with this file option again, and instead of importing, there's an export. And if we export it if we export it in bibtech or biblatex format, Zotero, I believe, limits you to one of those. And again, we talked last week that for us, the distinction is kind of semantic, that we're not going to see a lot of difference between a bibtech or biblatex formatted citation list. So if you engage with file, go export, then you can export as a bibtech or biblat. Let's check it out real quick here. So I don't remember what it is. So I'm going to open my Zotero here on my local desktop copy, and I'm going to go File and Export Library. It's slow. There we go, bibtech. So it's allowing you to do both. It really doesn't matter. You can do either. It might have some minor consequence on some more modern type references that you might have access to. Boy, it doesn't like me trying to exit out of that. Okay, already. Yes. Sorry, I know I said we wanted to export, and now I don't want to export. I really don't like that. So exporting is just a function of engaging with that same process, but instead of selecting import, you select export. We did look at RStudio and see how we might want to insert, how Zotero is well integrated for RStudio, and the nice integration is exclusive to the visual editor, which is a little unfortunate because it's not how I prefer to script when I'm creating things. Now the snip that you're looking at here, the picture on the left, this is actually a screenshot that I took from Positron, not RStudio. And I know we've been staying mostly within RStudio here on these weekly sessions, but the snip in the interface, one of the reasons I took the Positron snip was because the interface looks the same. These two elements here are how you're going to engage with Zotero using either RStudio or using Positron. Once you're in the visual editor, it's going to change a little bit how your actual document that you're scripting looks, but then you're going to have access to all these. You're going to have access to a new toolbar, and that toolbar is going to reflect some of the information that you expect to see in other word processors. So the visual editor, to me, it really turns the scripting environment into an environment that looks more like a word processor, a conventional word processor. And so if you choose that insert option, you're going to have you're going to have a menu, and within that menu there is a citations. There's the opportunity to select citations, and so the neat integration with RStudio and Positron is that when you engage with citations under this insert button, it's going to search and find your Zotero repository for you. There's one caveat here that I found out this week as I went into Positron and tried to do this was if you're using positron and do this, Zotero needs to actually be open. So the software itself you need to access, and it needs to be active on your local machine. That's different for RStudio. RStudio doesn't need that. That's not a requirement. So RStudio, you can operate completely independently from Zotero. You can go and find whatever citations you want within Zotero, engage with it, put stuff into folders if you want, close it, go into RStudio, and your expectation is, regardless of the status of Zotero, the citations that you've populated within your Zotero library are going to be available to you. So in Positron, that's not the case. In Positron, if you want that same functionality, you're going to need to actually have Zotero be open, be active. So that's the only difference I saw. I was more, it struck me more the similarities than any sort of difference there. So it was kind of comforting that Positron was operating essentially the same as RStudio, with the one exception of the Zotero software itself needs to be open. And then we spent quite a bit of time on how I use Zotero, which is not for a citation manager, but I use it for its style repository. And I said last week we weren't sure how many different citation types are in there. I did do a little further digging this week, and it wasn't a lot. I didn't need to dig much because it says pretty much on the landing page there that there's 10,840 different styles. Now, last week we just kind of grabbed a bunch of random ones and didn't see visually all that much difference between this random style and that random style. So my supposition is that of those 10,840, there's there's a very minor subset of those have meaningfully visually different kind of feel to them. But the way that you engage with this is, again, hit those hyperlinks and go ahead and just find one that you like. That the one that I tend to use as a psychologist is the APA, American Psychological Association. The 7th edition is the current one. So that's, oh my goodness, I didn't want to do that. No, I actually have 6 copies of that in my downloads folder, which is about 5 more than I need. But once you get that, you just want to go ahead and save that CSL file. So it's going to come in with the extension CSL. And you're going to want to save that within your project directory. I do recommend, if you're using heavy citations within a RStudio authored project, to do that within a project directory. The more complex your project is, the more that's necessary. So if you really want to impose a format on it, go ahead and do it in its own project directory. But once you download that, you just save it in the project directory, and then you call it out within the front matter of your project. And so here it's on line 5. The command is simply CSL. Now, the indentation on this on line 5 is none. So there's no indentation. This is a first level specification. So there's no spaces between the start of the line in terms of the left hand margin and the start of the scripting. So CSL starts immediately. This is the way that we expect to specify these citation style files, except if you are dealing with typist document types. So traditionally, there's been a difference between PDF and HTML documents that we render using this process, and this newer document type called typist. And with the newer document type typist, it has its own processor of citation information, and that's normally not going to be an issue unless you want to control what your citations look like. And so if you want to control what your citations look like, the workaround I've found that seems to work is to use this cite proc true command or subcommand under typist. And so that will actually force the normal citation processor that's used. When I say normal, I mean used for HTML and PDF files. It's through the piece of software called Pandoc. But if we use cite proc true, then we'll be able to kind of override the default typist rendering of the citations. And I was kind of surprised last week that where we saw Where we saw this being of consequence was not in the bibliography itself, but it was in the in-text citations. So the in-text citations, as well as the references at the end of your document, they're both going to be affected by your citation style language sheet. So that CSL file that you find here, it's going to affect both of those. And so when we didn't use cite proc true, the end of the document bibliography looked great. It looked like what we wanted to look like given different citation styles that we had specified. What didn't look great was the in-text specification. So the in-text specification was not being reflective or as truly reflective as we anticipated if we didn't use this cite proc true. So cite proc true, if you're using a typist file, is probably just a safer way to go. Okay. So that was Zotero and a little Irish cheer, I guess, for or toast for the end of the alphabet. We got it all the way through Z. And it's water, by the way, so I'm drinking water. Today what we're going to do is we're going to look at some different ways to cite packages. So this will be fun because this is a little more R-y, so this is a little more consistent with the way that most people think about using R. Apologies in advance for this exceedingly cluttered slide. As a professor, I would not like to have information packaged like this. No pun intended, I guess. But I did get more consistent feedback throughout the years that students preferred more text as opposed to less text. So maybe it doesn't bother you as much as it bothers me. But this exceedingly cluttered slide does bother me. I should have changed it into a couple of slides. But I tried to pack it all into one. Rookie mistake. So we're going to talk about a way to auto-generate a reference file in BibTeX format that R will do for you, so you don't need to go in there and say these are the packages that I have used. R will look through your file and identify which packages you've used. There's going to be a caveat, so we're going to get to foreshadowing here. The caveat has to do with the use of caching in your chunks. If any of you are out there and know what that means. If you're not familiar with what that means, don't worry about it. We're going to get to it. But if you cache your chunks, it's possible that you might want to think more carefully about how you're engaging with this process of auto bibliography generation of your packages. Okay, so within the knitr package, and the knitr package is something that comes bundled with R. It's one of those packages that when you install R, it comes pre-installed for you. It's not something that typically people need to go and search for. It's just there. It's the engine that powers much of what we do when we're crafting these documents that have analytical components as well as scripting components, specifically for the use case of R, the language R. So knitr was intended to kind of marry those two distinct things that we focus on when we're creating products. And so knitr has a hidden function in it, and that hidden function is dot packages. Now, the dot prefix is kind of a convention that's largely shared across our package developers. That is a functionality that's present, but it's not a functionality that is intended to have a lot of documentation or acknowledgement. If you do a normal help search on dot package, you're not going to find anything. It's just hidden in here somewhere. I thought I had identified it at some point. No, I'm not seeing it. Let me see real quickly if I can do this find isn't always great on pages like this. knitr.package. Yeah, I'm not seeing it. Okay, so I might have given a bad link there in terms of I thought that was a bit of code that was going to show the specification of the dot packages function itself. We'll talk through it when we get to it. it's meant for a very focused purpose. And then there's also a function that is documented and you can find information about within the same package, knitr, and that's called write_bib. And write_bib is going to create a file for you that contains bibtech or bib.latex formatted citations, and it's focused on packages, so you can call out specific packages. So here, if I want ggplot2 to be acknowledged within a file called packages.bib, again, do this within a project directory so you can find that. It's going to be easier to find it if you're doing that. This .packages says, oh, also add every other thing, add everything that I'm using in this project that I have. Every time you see a library and then a package identified, go ahead and put that in this bibliography as well. So you're going to want to do something like this within a code chunk, and then within your YAML, you're going to want to call out this package. And so it's kind of a two-step process. This is very similar to what I traditionally have done. It's a very similar process, but instead of using these knitr functions, I use papaja functions. And papaja is a package, again, focused on the American Psychological Association kind of style manual, but it has some helper functions in there that are really clever and really similar to what I just went through with knitr. So we'll probably start with knitr, and then I'll show you papaja, and then if we have time, we'll get to two other packages that are focused on this concept of citing the packages, the R packages that you're using within a project. And one's called Grateful, and another's called Pacaret. And so Pacaret and Grateful both seem to be currently active and supported. There were some other options that looked like they were more maybe kind of put to bed a little bit. So these were two that I don't have installed. I haven't used them yet. So hopefully we have some time and I can install them and we can all go through them and check them out together. But I have not checked them out yet. I have found, frankly, I've found papaja to be sufficient for what I do. But we certainly want to go through this knitr option as well. So let me see if I can this week leave this open. I've for whatever reason that's been challenging for me, leaving my slides open, but I'm going to try to leave them open tonight because there are these kind of notes to myself of what we need to try out. I'm going to open R, and of course R is opening on my other screen, not this screen. R, you silly R. And in terms of a project, let's use the Zotero project that we started last week, just because I'm getting a proliferation of things and I don't need that. I guess we can do a different, we can do an entirely different file though. So we'll call this, what are we doing? Packages? Package citations. I gotta remember to speak a little louder tonight, just because, again, my understanding is that my audio might be a little difficult, which I hope it's not. Okay, so let's call this packages testing. That's dumb. I don't want to do that. It's not dumb, I'm sorry. But you don't want to get too elaborate with the name of your files because that's going to be repeated in the name of your rendered document as well. And it just gets a little unwieldy. So there's our package citations. I don't believe there's any packages loaded in here. Normally that's done within these chunks. We can do that within an early chunk here. So let's load ggplot. And let's load lubridate. I like lubridate. That's, again, I don't know why, but I've been having so much fun with that package. And we could actually do, I guess let's do it just because why not? So we'll put a ggplot in there. I don't think we need to go through and do any sort of lubridate. But we'll do a ggplot for sure. We'll pick one here that looks nice. Ooh, violin plot. Those are always pretty. Now this one over here, it uses that vidrous kind of spectrum of colors, so it's going to require a little more. So I'm going to take one of these simpler ones. The clipboard is not enabled on that, which makes me think that maybe there's something I need down here, but we'll try it. We'll see. We shall see. So I'm just going to paste that. We already called out ggplot as something we're interested in. It's nice that they annotate this. I don't think we need that. But we certainly do need P to be called out. I must have erased that. So instead of calling out the object itself, I'm just going to ask for ggplot. And we didn't, on this chunk, we haven't specified anything in terms of how to approach the scripting versus the output versus warnings versus all that kind of stuff. So we'll go back and we'll change that. But certainly we see an echo there. We see warnings, which were expected. And then we see an echoing of this. So there was a loading of the packages, then there were warnings associated with the package loadings, and then we see the script itself that specifies the graph. Normally on those graphs, we just want, I mean, it's good to get feedback, so, but we don't need that warning. And then there's usually message is another one that's good to turn off in these sorts of projects where we're just interested in the visual. There, that looks better. And then, of course, if we want to give it a fig cap, a bunch of violins. And again, the double quote, excuse me, the double quote versus single quote kind of requirements in Quarto operate a little differently than they did within our markdown. So this, with these spaces in here, this is something that I would be very uncomfortable with using the old R markdown system, but Quarto seems to handle that quite a bit better. And now that we have fig violin in here, if we wanted to reference that at some point, we could say, see the pretty at fig plot, or what I call it, violin. Yeah, fig violin. And then that prefix should give us a word itself for the figure. And you can override this stuff as well. But one of the neat things about Quarto is you get this hover upon preview upon hover. And I believe that came with Quarto 1.4. There was one of them that I was like, that's so cool. And I think it was 1.4, maybe 1.42. Okay, but there now we have a package that we're using, one that we're not using, but I'm calling out. So what we want to do with this is we want to create a bibliography. I might already have one in here. Let me see. I do. So I'm going to get rid of this references.bib. Should probably look to see what's in there first. I don't know what's in there. And we're going to use our knitr functions. And let's go ahead and I'm going to copy my code here from this chunk. So I do have my clipboard enabled. You can put this in the same chunk if you want. I've kind of developed the habit of, as I'm crafting these, you don't want too many chunks. And these are also called code blocks. You don't want too many of these, but also you want to be able to navigate it when you're visually scrolling through, and so that it's kind of helpful for me to have similar information put in the same chunk. So here we'll just call this bib. So giving them names can help as well. Then the outline generally shows. My outline's not showing the chunks. Trying to remember, I don't use the outline very much. I thought the outline did show chunks, but it's not actually showing my chunk labels right now. So we'll also do, actually I don't want to do this on every chunk, so I'm going to do it at the YAML level. So we'll do, not eval, we'll do echo false, we'll do warning false, and we'll do message false. And that will leave us with a fairly nice clean document. Now here what I'm asking to be done in this bib chunk is I'm saying use from the knitr package, use this write_bib function, and I want you to see all the packages that are being used in this file. Now get rid of this for now. Well, let's add one. So I'm going to add one that I use for a different project, and it should be able to identify that ggplot and lubridate are being used in this current project. Anisrake is not being used, but it's being asked to be cited, and then it should put them in this bib, and we can call it whatever we want. We can say leprechaun, probably spelled wrong. And now when we render this, if you look at my files here on the lower right, there's no .bib information, but we expect one to be created. So let's go ahead and run it. So there's our information, and yes, I have a leprechaun.bib. So it's actually, I didn't pick up the dot. Uh-oh. So one of the things that used to happen with papaja was there was occasionally a consequence of where we had this chunk specified, and I'm hoping that that's not the case. I don't use the knitr function here. I'm curious though. Okay, so it looks like it is going to be consequential in terms of where that's located. Huh. Well, that's good to know. So if you're using this process, you might want to put that chunk at the very end of your document. But here you see it's actually pulling in references for all these different packages. Now, if we want to cite them, we can just grab the key. So the key is located on the first line here. And then next to the C, the pretty figure, I can also say also at, and then the key is a very cool package for doing post stratification weighting. The two dashes there, that's actually a bit of markdown. So that's common convention that's used in these scripting processes, and that just says I want an n dash, en, and 3 dashes means m dash. If you get into publishing at all, that's something that copy editors they care about. I don't know. I guess I started to care about them because they care about them. Oh, so I did something very silly there. I didn't specify our bibliography in our YAML, so let's go ahead and do that. And I think I'm going to show you also, before we get too far here, kind of good practice on how to organize your packages bib as opposed to or in concert with your kind of meaningful references bib. And meaningful is going to be citing the literature in the field of study of whatever it is that you're focused on here. Okay. So now identifying in the YAML that yes, there is some citation information that's available. Now I get it nicely referenced here in my rendered document. And this would look the same if this was a PDF or a typist or a HTML file. So to do a quick typist. So we can see the typist queue, my favorite queue. I love the typist queue. So there we go. And again, the rendering looks a little bit different. You're going to see a different hyperlink kind of indicator upon hover with a hyperlink, and all this stuff is, can be overwritten. You see that the default citation style coming in for typist is different. I don't know what that is, but there's an actual number put next to the citation. That was a little unexpected, actually. So we would have to, not to revisit last week, but we would have to go in if we really wanted to change that. We would have to find our own citation style language, specify it. My expectation is PDF is not going to do that. So, I may have a citation style sheet in this project directory, and I'm guessing that typist picked it up. That's probably what happened. Which, again, speaks to the fact that the typist has a different citation manager by default. So, I know people probably hate it when I do this, but let me, yeah, there's an APA in there. That's it? Oh, yeah, evolutionary anthropology. So I'm going to get rid of these two. Now it's also really interesting that typist does, I'm just guessing it does that. Maybe it doesn't do that. Maybe it just has a default that comes built into typist. Yeah, okay. So I was wrong. So it looks like it wasn't picking up the CSL file. It actually has just a different looking default citation style than do the PDF and the HTML files. Okay. So if we wanted to, let's say we wanted to do an academic citation. See if anyone's looked at leprechauns. Truth About Leprechauns. That's a book. Here's a folklore citation. Kind of like that. So we'll add this article by John J. Winberry. Man, what an interesting thing to study. I did school all wrong. I don't know. I got stuck doing quantitative stuff just because people said I was good at it. So they're like, you should do this. And I kind of did it, but I don't know. I feel like maybe I should have done something different. Okay, we'll call this academic.bib. And now in my document, I want to cite the elusive elf. So I'm going to save the key just like I did with the R package. And we'll do a citation here. Leprechauns. I got to learn out how to spell them, I think. Leprechauns are fun, but mischievous. Why do I pick words like mischievous and leprechauns? So that's the key that I want, and it's coming from a different bib called academic.bib. Now, in the YAML, a couple weeks ago, we talked about YAML as a language, and YAML as a language has its own unique specific rules. And usually as R users, when we're dealing with these square brackets, our expectation is we're going to concatenate something. That is, we're going to actually specify the listing of things. So you might be used to seeing that concatenate function, the C letter in parentheses. That's not done in the YAML. So if I want, the YAML rules are different. So if I want to list out multiple bibliographies, I can just separate them by comma. I should be able to just separate them by comma and enclose in square brackets. So now it's going to pull up both of these, and it's going to look for references in both. And that's important because my academic citation is going to be located in a different spot than my R package citation. So let's go ahead and render and see if it works. And I'm going to talk in a second about why that's important. So there's my Winberry. There's my Winberry citation. They're both located in my reference section now. So I have my R package. I have my academic reference. And the reason the recommendation is to keep these two separate is because the write bib function is going to override, it's going to overwrite the old bib file. So every time I run this, file, every time I render this file, I'm actually getting a new leprechaun.bib file. So just to kind of check that out here, it's now 6:48 Central. I'm gonna re-render this, and we should see a time change on this leprechaun.bib. There it goes, 6:48. And I mean, that could be that it appended, but it didn't. It didn't append, it just overwrote it. And so my academic one should be left alone. Yeah, that was written at 6:45. I don't have any R commands in here saying, go ahead and write this, do this for me, please. But certainly with this function, you're gonna want to be aware that every time you run your script, that it's going to create a new file, whatever you deem to call, whatever you want to call it, it's going to create a new one. And for most people, you're not going to include packages that you don't that you're not using in this particular session. So the reason that these functions are important is there's actually I think it's called installed. There's actually a base R function called installed packages. And so if you go ahead and run that, it's going to tell you every package that you have installed that it can recognize. And there's just going to be a million of them. I mean, even if you don't use even if you yourself don't go in there and load a bunch of packages for specific purposes, obviously I do. I've got a million of them here. Everyone's going to have a lot of these. So the dot packages option is a really fun one and a really kind of powerful one because it's taking only a subset of what you have installed. It's not taking what you have installed, it's taking what you have installed and have specified within your document itself. Now, I'm taking out this anise rake, so this should, now if I render, this should not find it within my leprechaun.bib. So usually in a rendered document that pops up as just question marks. So I'm gonna render this just to see if we get a question mark for that R anise rake, which is what we expect. Yeah, so it says, hey, what are you talking about? I don't see one of those. Here's a warning. Here's a warning for
What?
William. Ooh, that was kind of loud. Sorry. So that was to be expected, but we can go in and check our not our academic, but our leprechaun.bib. We'll say, no. What I wanted to cite was actually ggplot. ggplot is fantastic. I love ggplot. And again, Lubridate is coming in. Why are we getting to? So this is interesting. So we're actually getting kind of old, we're getting some older versions of packages as well as current versions of packages coming in. And we might deconstruct that a little bit here, but just for now, let's just put that aside as kind of an oddity, potentially come back to that. I'm going to put it in ggplot so we can see that that comes in fine. And some of these, it's funny, some of these, there's not really a imposed standard on how to cite your own and how to document your own package. So there's a bunch of kind of complaining about what people do, but some people do some kind of funny things in the authors. I've seen an author list that says and a bunch of others. So it's always kind of fun to take a look. And by the way, this is considered kind of considerate. So the people that have put the good work together to come up with these packages that have functions that we can use and make our lives easier, it's it's appreciated if you go ahead and cite. Now, so the way that we're engaging with write_bib from the knitr package is we're going into the bib file that it creates for us, which is nice, but we're just gonna one by one grab those and say, I want to cite that. I want to cite this. And boy, my voice is going again. And our lubridate is also very cool for formatting date variables, date information. I don't know why, but I love lubridate. It's just I should get in there and kind of unpack some of the functions and see how it's so internally knowledgeable. But they're both Hadley Wickham packages, and I'm guessing Hadley at this point in time doesn't care about kind of personal recognition, so he's probably just taking third authorship on that. I believe that was initially just a Hadley package. Okay, so that's one way you can actually engage with these packages in terms of citations. The way that I historically have done it is through using these papaja functions, and there's two of them that you want to use together. Kind of similar, or actually quite similar to the knitr functions, and they might actually be built on the knitr functions. But there's an refs, and then the reason I want to really talk about this is because there's also a cite function, and cite is pretty neat. So let me go ahead and load papaja in here as well. And I'm just going to render it so we get that populated within our leprechaun bib. So I'm going to check that. Now we see that it's in here, and it does look like I'm not getting duplication on every package, only on some of them. So that's interesting. This prefix, by the way, this prefix is something that you can override, but this is going to become important when we engage with the cite function from within papaja, because it's going to go looking for those. So, okay, now we got papaja loaded. So what I might want to do here is, instead of using knitr write bib, I want to use the refs function from papaja, and that also creates a bib file. Now this one, I believe the way I've used this, you have the option of appending to the bib file in addition to overwriting. So some of the reasons why we wanted to keep our academic references separate from our package references might become obviated here if we use the papaja process, because my recollection is there is a way to actually append instead of overwrite. So let's check out the arguments that are permitted here in refs. Off the top of my head, I don't remember. So it says file. File should be important. So refs is a wrapper for create bib. And then here you see a comment that I was alluding to, but when you're scripting your documents this way, it's possible that a chunk like this, so a chunk here that's on lines 11 through 32, if this is computationally, if this takes a lot of computational power and it's not expected to change, we can add a cache. We can add a cache command to this, and that just says, don't do this unless something changes here. And so I've only used this frequently in simulation studies. So I do have some simulation studies that the processing of them can take days or even weeks. And so in those circumstances, I do cache my chunks. And so you can start to kind of forecast where, well, that might interfere with the ability of some of these functions to go in there and recognize that these libraries are being called. And that's the caveat with using this process, is it's just, You want to make sure if you are caching any of your chunks, you might want to just kind of look a little deeper into some of the capabilities of these functions that we're actually using. So it's a really simple command. It's just r_refs and then what you want it to be. If I open that, it gives me, and I think the original one also gave me the base. Yeah, so they give you the base R reference, which is nice. And then it also, this one, the papaja one, does not give me any repeat values. By repeat values, I'm referring to the lubridate and the ggplot, which I'm for some reason getting two different. Using the knitr function, I'm actually getting two different bibtech references for, and I'm not sure why that is. It doesn't really have much consequence, so it's just there. Doesn't really matter unless I call it out. But here, using the papaja, it's just pulling in only the packages that are specified. Now, tiny labels was not specified, but tiny labels is coming in as a dependency on one of these that I've specified. I'm not sure which one actually, but it's coming in as a dependency on one of those, and that's something that you got to expect to happen as well. Now, the reason that papaja, one of the other reasons that papaja is so neat and so powerful is if I have a method section, I can just say, instead of going in and saying, I want to reference this, I want to reference ggplot, I want to reference lubridate, I can just say, we used, and then inline code, so I'm going to do a single tick, and then R, and then, let's see, how do I do this? It's been a while since I've actually done this. Cite R, and that should be the bib file. And there's a bunch of other kind of things you can do on here as well. So we're just going to use the bare bones version of this. So cite R, and then in R, it looks like in double quotes, I'm going to specify the bib file that we created. Now, we're kind of going back and forth here a little bit in terms of different processes. So it would be good to check leprechaun2 to make sure that the keys are the same, ggplot2 and lubridate with the R prefix, lubridate, so that looks like it's going to actually be okay. But we may need to come back and alter this a little bit, but I'm just going to try this inline code that says there's an R command coming, and I'm using this function from the papaja package. I loaded it here, and it's not a shared function, so it should be fine by itself. It doesn't conflict with anything from ggplot or from lubridate, and then it should pull it just from that file. So let's see if that works. So if I look at my project now, you get this freely populated for you. So now my methods section says we used R with the citation and the R packages, ggplot, lubridate, papaja, and tiny labels. I mean, it even puts in there and. Oh, if tiny labels is barth, then well, I guess I shouldn't say. Okay, and then I guess it, obviously it appends all those at the end as well, and if we wanted to affect that in terms of its styling, we could. But I love I love the steps of this, which is I have an rrefs command and I have an rcite r command, and those two things, only those two things, that's all I've added to this entire document, and they add not only an entire citations listing of the packages used, but they also give me text that is pre-populated within, most people would probably put that in a methods or procedure section. So it knows to cite base R as well as, and look at this, it even catches the version. So it's got to be the version of R I'm using. Yeah, 4.5. I mean, You can't get any more slick than that. So maybe you could get more slick than that. So we have kind of over on time here. My voice is giving out. So uh, I think I'll just leave grateful and packret there. If anyone's out there and you want to check this out on your own, um, check them out. So these are intended as two other options for doing essentially the same thing. Um, now that we just revisited papaja, I remember how much I love it. So I don't know why you would feel a need to go beyond this. And so you don't need to use papaja for its full intended purpose, which is to craft entire manuscripts formatted in accordance with the stylings of the American Psychological Association's style manual. You can just use these two functions and it's probably worth it. R underscore refs and cite underscore R. Those two things together. I mean, the fact that it just takes, uh, it, I love it. It's amazing. Do a quick PDF, make sure everything looks okay. Let's add a package. Let's put an obscure one in there. Book down. I haven't used book down for a while. Careless. So careless is kind of a funny one. Careless is one that we use in survey research quite a bit. Um, when you're responding to those, please fill this out surveys. The expectation is people aren't always going to attend exceedingly carefully to the questions, so we have some kind of back-end functions to just kind of probably a little too conservatively screen people out if their response patterns if they're too consistent or too variable is kind of the two things that we're looking at. So did it pick up? Did it not pick up the new one? What new one did I put in there? We got papaja, we got tiny labels, we got lubricate, we got the elusive elf, we got ggplot. Looks to me like it didn't like careless. Maybe because we didn't use careless. All right, let's try. Well, let's really blow it up and try the tidyverse, because the tidyverse is going to have a ton of packages loaded with it as we talk about dependencies. Yeah, now we're getting so what might be happening is that I need an overwrite. I might need an overwrite command on this. So that might have been confusing appending versus overwriting. There's not a whole lot of append. Append, I think, is what I was looking for. What are my true? Let's try true and see if that does anything. So, if there may be some amendments that you want. Yeah. So it looks like so I'm glad we looked at this. So my R underscore refs usage, if you're going to go in there and be changing things, adding things, you probably do want a modifier of that. And so this append equals true to me makes sense in terms of something you probably want to add. And so now this list got really big with the entire tidyverse. And what was the other one? We should check it just to make sure. Book down? What did we do? I forgot what we did. Let me see if I can find it here. We were somewhere around here. Just want to make sure careless. We wanted careless. How careless of me, I couldn't remember. So that append true should take care of that. It's careless in here. Look at it, it even alphabetizes these. So I didn't really notice it before we had so many packages loaded in, but they're listed in alphabetical order, which is fantastic. We even have a umlaut here on Mueller. Can't get any better than that. That's awesome. Okay, look at this huge reference list that we spent absolutely no time constructing on our own. R did it for us. That's why we use these processes that we use, and we'll continue to use them on a weekly, nay, I say daily basis. All right, I'm getting loopy. Thanks, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving or St. Patrick's Day. It is water. I guarantee you, I swear to you, it's only water. But happy St. Patrick's Day. And next week, if someone stumbles across this and you have a topic you want to see covered, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just find something on the fly, unless I get kind of the itch to go in there and take a closer look at these two packages that we didn't look at, which are Grateful and Pack Rat. So, okay, thanks everybody. Have a good week.